Hello and welcome to Retech, and today we're going to cover the ZX Spectrum Next, or an affordable version of the ZX Spectrum Next, which is something that for a long time, ever since the ZX Spectrum Next was kind of announced and then it was put into production and there was a limited run, I've had my reservations about this machine. So I never went down the route of having a ZX Spectrum Next or really going for it, because there were, in my mind, better alternatives out there, and also better uses of, you know, your hard-earned kind of money, really. I think that's probably the best way to put it. So let me explain. We have things like the Commodore 64 remakes as by Retro Games, the C64, and I really did like that model because it was a full-size Commodore. Basically in every other way, the way it looked visually, the way it kind of worked for most of it, you know, for most parts, the way it was attainable for people to try out this retro computing kind of lark or hobby, or to find out what it was all about. And this all made sense. The retro computers models on the original Commodore 64 Maxi, the full-size version, really hit the nail on the head. And you know, it's kind of proven its point, because it was very popular and people who bought it kind of then went on to getting into the kind of retro scene, or a lot of them did. Others used it as a way of playing the games from that era, and others used it to try out their hand at a little bit of programming, which is all brilliant. And it didn't pretend to be anything else, and it was just a remake of a Commodore 64, although in emulation. But you know, it was very close. And even the 8-bit guy commented that the C64 Maxi was pretty close, pretty decent, and you know, the issues that they had with the Mini, they'd largely solved, you know, in terms of sound lag, etc. So it was quite a decent machine, and it was I have no problems with that. And even the VIC-20 kind of restyle of it, they brought out a limited run in the kind of beige VIC-20 version. That to me was kind of a way of expanding the range, maybe a little bit of a kind of a marketing ploy, but I liked it. It served me well because it was something I wanted anyway, and also it didn't take away from the whole experience, and you could also just run it as a standard Commodore 64, etc. So it was a very good machine. Now, the Spectrum Next, I kind of feel that it was always overdone. Okay, I understand upgrading the hardware, which is fine. I understand going for a kind of a retro style keyboard, kind of in keeping with the Spectrum Plus range. Fine, I really do not have a problem with that. But because of the price of it, I mean, I know it cost money to get that keyboard produced, but it was the actual cost of the unit to the consumer, which I always felt was a bit on the pricey side, because most people didn't really use the Next for its advantages. They used it for being able to be Spectrum compatible with either 48 or 128, and you know, being able to up the processor speed to allow certain games, or if not most games, run a little smoother, and be a little bit more playable to a point on, you know, the original software, or using the original software. So you know, I don't think the actual Spectrum Next side of it has been exploited that much. Even now, I've been searching for Spectrum Next specific software. Now, I would have thought that the triple AY chipset and so on would have been a boon, an absolute boon, to people who wanted to produce music on this thing. And I thought that would have been its kind of settling point, where you could have a MIDI system connected to it, and you could use all the sound chips that are available on this machine. And I thought that would have been an excellent move, but that kind of hasn't really taken off. I'm not downplaying the Next. I think it's a lovely looking machine, But whether it was for me or not, that I was still kind of debating it, and whether it was for general use or not, I was kind of debating. So what we're going to do today is look at an alternative, but first I've been doing a bit on the clones, and I want to try and cover as many clones as absolutely possible. Okay, so there might be a few more videos on the clones, but I'm going to go back to doing, you know, other stuff as well. But this had an outing a little while ago. I know you're going to say it's just a Spectrum Plus. Okay, yeah, well it kind of is and it isn't. This is a modified Spectrum Plus, which I kind of use a lot, as well as my Harlequin, which I use actually more than this, to be honest. And because of that, I'd like to revisit this as an everyday classic, and this is what I thought would make these machines eminently useful. Plus it's given me an idea for maybe a little bit later on within the kind of Spectrum next thing. But this is part one of this video. This video's just a single shot video, but it's going to have two separate parts in it, and I'll put the timelines at the bottom. But first we're going to cover this quite unusual ZX Plus and the reasons to why I think this makes a lot of sense, other than the Harlequin clone, which I've actually said I really do like anyway. So let's take a quick look. Right, okay, so you're going to say, well, what is this all about? It's just a ZX Spectrum Plus. It's been rather well looked after, judging by the box, but let's get this thing open and I'll quickly show you. Okay, so everything looks fairly much standard. Okay, so we're just going to take it out of the box. And it's actually one of the few Spectrums I've kept like this. I haven't really used it for over, must be 2 years now, and that's because I got the Harlequin, which I quite like. Really thinking about it, this machine has been kind of left to one side since I got the Harlequin, which is a shame, because you'll see why I think this is an amazing little piece of kit, and it makes a lot of sense. So the first thing you'll notice, if you've seen a video 2 years ago on this machine, is that it doesn't look, let's turn it around, quite the standard ZX Spectrum. It's in white, and this has given me an idea of what I'm going to do going forward with the next part of this video. But anyway, it's a standard ZX Spectrum Plus with a white case and your Bluetooth moniker, and that gives a lot of it away. You see, other than the the upgraded power supply, etc., it's also got a little USB charging point in here, which is great if you just want to charge things while you're using this machine. And on the back, it's just completely and utterly standard. There's nothing to give away apart from the white, that this machine is any real different. This also might give it away as well. There's a little composite fly lead as well. So this machine's been converted to composite, and it has a little Bluetooth adapter inside. Now, if you don't want to do it yourself, you can get one of these, which is a little Bluetooth 3.5mm adapter here. And all you need to do is plug it into the socket on the back, the one you'd normally use to load tape games from, and you can just load your games via this once it's connected to your smartphone. And it's also chargeable, so you can charge it up via this. Okay, and all this has done is taken one of these apart, put it in here, run the little 5 volts across to here to the little USB charging point inside the case, and then that's it really. So you can still use both, but this just makes it convenient. So let's get this thing plugged in and have a quick recap as to why this was, until my Harlequin, was my favourite ZX Spectrum Plus. Okay, so just to give you a rough idea of how this works, we're using ZX Play, and what I'm going to do is I'm just going to use one of the files from ZX Play. There's just about every program and game you can ever want. So I'm going to go to my go-to one, so I'm going to just load it up as normal, press return, press play, and then you can see once you press play on your phone, it just loads it as normal, and that's what it's doing now. So it'll take a couple of minutes to load in, but you know, it's just via a mobile phone, which is brilliant. There's literally just about every game you could ever need or want to play just off of this smartphone. Okay, so again, a very cheap and cheerful Bluetooth adapter. You don't even have to open the case, you can plug it in the back and use it like this. And as you can see, it's loading now fine. So while it's loading, basically it's very easy to do, okay, and it makes these machines much more usable, although you're still waiting for the load times, and it's just a standard 48K ZX Spectrum, which, you know, is understandable because 99% of the games really ran on the 48K ZX Spectrum, so the vast majority of people's nostalgia are going to be centered around maybe this machine or even the +2 range with the 48K kind of range of games, because they were the most prolific. Now, there's nothing stopping you doing this to a Harlequin, putting the same Bluetooth adapter in the back of a Harlequin. That would work exactly the same way using ZX Play. I like to use a Div MMC with my Harlequins because I kind of figure that makes a little bit more sense, because again, the loading time's a little quicker and you can put a lot on just a single SD card, but I'd never get or have the time to put this many games that's on this phone through ZX Play onto a memory card. I just seriously don't have the time to do that, so this makes it really convenient. Okay, I've just paused it here because there's a group apparently in the USA who claims that the theme tune for Monty on the Run is theirs. Nothing to do with Mr. Hubbard and his really fantastic score, but this group in America is claiming that that's their tune and they wrote it and they own copyright on it, so it's a bit bizarre. But anyway, so you get the general gist of this. Basically, it makes it much more convenient. You can have everything that you ever want to play in one case via your smartphone, and you can probably see that this was my favorite ZX Spectrum Plus until, you know, I built the Harlequin, the 48K originally, then the 128, because this still has the same potential issues as every other 40-year-old piece of electronics, that, you know, at any time you could have a capacitor go out, or a processor give up the ghost, or one of the ICs stop working, or a memory chip decides not to work properly, and so on, which is, you know, part of the course. So it's still an old machine even though it's been refreshed. So that's why, you know, the Harlequins and the like are, in my view, brilliant, because it keeps the longevity on these machines, as in the Spectrum machine, because the Harlequin's a virtual copy in hardware of the ZX Spectrum, and there's a couple of others out there, and I don't mind having copies of the Spectrum done in software as long as, you know, they look like an original ZX Spectrum, so you get the full experience. So this leads me on to the ZX Spectrum Next. Now, the Next is incredibly difficult to get hold of, especially if you were kind of a little bit late to the Kickstarter thing, or kind of decided fairly late that you wouldn't mind having a play with one. And on the kind of second-hand market, the ones I've seen that come up for sale are either ridiculously expensive for some unknown reason, maybe because owners think they're incredibly rare and special and that they demand these crazy astronomical prices, or they are broken. And there's a lot of them that come up with faults, such as keys falling off of them, you know, it keeps resetting, rebooting, all of that kind of thing. and along with various other kind of hardware faults. So they come up now and again. Working ones fairly infrequently, but very expensive. Broken ones that need repair or have keyboard problems because of maybe the quality of the keys, etc. I don't know, but it's just from what I've seen, it's kind of anecdotal evidence that they're either broken or overpriced. So what's the alternative? What can you do? Well, there is an alternative, and that's the ZX Spectrum N Go. Now, I managed to get hold of one of these. I think there was only 2 left in stock. It's been out for a little while, and I've kind of intentionally ignored it to a point because I was kind of more interested in the recreation of the standard hardware for longevity, as I've said before. So anyway, I decided to go for this because there was only 2, and they're not really producing any more until 2023 according to what I've seen on their website. So hopefully if you're watching in 2023 you might be able to get hold of one, and this was one of 2 that were available. And this is the marble effect kind of keyboard. You can buy the board on its own, but that again, it wasn't available until next year sometime. So I decided to go and plump for this, and it's quite a nice little thing. It's a recreated case, which is really smooth. There's no mottling that the original ZX Spectrum had in its black. It's just a very smooth case with a quite a nice kind of overlay, gunmetal style overlay with a black keyboard, and you know, it really looks the part. And one nice thing is it comes with this little extension piece, which is for your HDMI cable. I don't need that, but I'll keep it with the micro because it's something that's easily to get lost. You just plug your HDMI cable into that, and it's quite a nice machine. It's got the usual ZX Spectrum personal computer logo on the back. It kind of looks and feels, and it feels kind of the same weight as a standard Spectrum. On the back you have a few separate cutouts for a PS2 style keyboard, monitor out, ear and mic, HDMI, which is nice, your edge connector, and your power supply. Now they supply a power supply with it because I bought the full thing. It comes to about a couple £100, which is a lot cheaper than trying to get hold of a ZX Spectrum Next, a direct clone of the Spectrum Next. It's the issue 2. It's got more memory than the Next on it, and basically it will do everything that your Spectrum Next will do. It comes with a switch mode power supply for 110 and 240, and a 2-pin plug, which you have to use an adapter for the UK, which is all right. It's quite a nice little power supply. It does the job. I've got a few of those myself for my normal ZX Spectrums, replacing the power supply units from the Sinclair ones, which are getting a little bit old, to kind of modern ones. But I tend to go ones with UK plugs on, but you know, you can just change the lead anyway and just put a UK plug on it. So yeah, it's not a bad looking machine. And the other thing is it's got 2 joystick ports on here, so they're on the right hand side of the board as you look at the machine. So if you wanted to put this in a different case, they do a Spectrum Next style keyboard and case for one of these, but you'd have to swap the ports over to here so you can desolder them and move them across to here, because there's actually 2 positions for these joystick ports. Now, as you can see it up against a slightly modified case on a Spectrum Plus, you know, it is a smaller machine. It's not even as wide as the Spectrum Plus keyboard, which most of you know who's got maybe a Sinclair Spectrum against a Spectrum Plus. So it's an exact replica case other than the color and the texture. So as you can see, it's a nice little unit. Now, some people I've read online have complained that you're going to miss out on the likes of the extra keys that the Plus has, such as, you know, the extended mode and, you know, the breakup here and so on. maybe where the arrow keys are positioned and where the delete key is, because remember, on a standard Spectrum it used to be a cap, shift and delete on here to delete anything, which is cap, shift and 0. So it would have been cap, shift and 0 on this rubber keyed keyboard. And not the biggest fan of a rubber keyed keyboard. So my idea is, or my idea was originally, is to buy the Spectrum Next style keyboard for this, which you can buy for about €75 plus taxes plus shipping. So you're talking probably about €100 all inclusive, and then getting a case to drop it into. You can get a 3D printed case, which is out there for about €135, including the keyboard or so. But my idea is to go down this route, the similar route to this machine, as in to dress up a non-functioning Spectrum Plus and just use the keyboard and the case and modify the back to match here as well. But also you need to modify this side for the SD card slot, because you got standard SD and micro SD in there, plus you also have your switches for reset and to select the menus on here. So what we're going to do is going to have a quick look at this machine, just to give you an idea as to whether I think this machine is worth going for instead of a Harlequin. Okay, so on the screen we have welcome to Next OS, and this is basically when you first switch the machine off. It's basically an evolution of the system software present on the ZX Spectrum 48K 128 plus 2 and plus 3. And it's got many features to take advantage of the capabilities of the ZX Spectrum Next. Okay, so basically it gives you a few options that you can use this machine for. So booting Next OS, a menu appears at the top as a current speed, so you can change your speed. You can also use joysticks, current time and date if you've got a real-time clock module installed, and so on. So, you know, it's not bad. It basically gives you a browser option, so you can load directly from the memory card or the SD card on the side. Okay, so it gives you other options such as ZX80 and ZX81 ROMs on here, and so on. So what we're going to do is we're going to hit space, and this is where you come into your browser, okay, and you just use your normal arrow keys on here. So one of the first things you'll find is you can just change up to 28 megahertz the speed of the processor. So you can go back down again to a standard configuration as well. So you've got 14, 7, 3.5. So we'll leave it on 3.5 for now, okay? Because even on the Sisyph 512, you can go up to 14 megahertz. 28's a bit beyond what it can do, but 28 megahertz is too much for most Spectrum software. It's the same as 14 megahertz on the Sisyph, because it's just too quick for it. So now the other options are command line, which is what you'd expect it to be, which is just this, and then you can just type away and then put whatever you want on there. So what I find as well is that this rubber keyboard that was supplied with this machine and there we go. Okay, so it's a normal kind of command line thing. So, and that's it. What I find is this rubber keyboard's a bit, I don't know if it's a membrane that they've used, the kind of recreated membranes, but it's not as good as even an original ZX Spectrum, which kind of lets the machine down just a little bit. But that's not a complaint concerning the way this was put together, because I think generally they've done a good job. The top button, which is the red button on the side of the machine, takes you back to the menu. The yellow button, which is the next one down, is your selection, and the bottom button takes you to snapshot, screenshot, tap files, etc. Okay, and debugging tools. This is not something you would be using very often. Okay, so what you'd normally be using is the ZX OS main kind of browser thing, very reminiscent of the original Spectrum 128. Okay, so if you go into browser, which is here, this is where anything that you've got on your SD card is put down here as a kind of a hard drive directory, if you would, on a kind of a classic micro or a classic PC. So you've got extras, documents, demos, games, licenses, etc. all down here. You can add to it. This is just an example of what you can do on this machine. Let's go down to games, just for something that most people would try. Okay, so go to directory, and it's split up into 128, 48. There's only a few on here, okay, and this, to be honest, the Spectrum Next collection on here isn't really much to write home about. It's a good start, but it's all the kind of the basic freebie games that you can download anywhere really for the Next, and I really don't think it shows off what the Next can actually do. I think it does a lot better than this. So we'll just go into this from Rusty Pixels just to give you a quick idea. As you can see, difference in speed. It's very quick on loading, and being HDMI as well, it puts the sound output through the screen or your TV. Okay. And this is an example of a game. And you can see it's alright. It's something that the ZX Spectrum couldn't actually do. Okay, so it gives you an idea that it is a little bit more advanced than your standard ZX Spectrum. So if I press the reset button again, and we'll just go back to the browser again, and then it always remembers where you kind of left off. So we'll go back, and what we'll do is we'll just pick a standard 128K game, just to show you what it can do with the machine itself. So we'll just use this game, Dizzy. And as you can see, you can't really knock this machine. I have no problems with this machine whatsoever. I think it's a really decent kind of extension to the ZX Spectrum range. It does a good job because it's got hardware sound chips on board, and with its extra features, it makes quite a nice addition. But whether or not it's worth somebody paying for a ZX Spectrum Next, over the odds really, or quite a lot of money, it's a choice on style. I think if you like the styling and you like the effort that's gone into the keyboard, etc., then yes, it's worthwhile. But to my mind, this is a good machine. But to my mind as well, I wouldn't use a lot of the features on this machine over and above what I would use on a Harlequin or a Sisyph 512. But we'll carry on and see if it changes my mind, okay? Because I'm doing this in fairly real time, to be honest. Okay, so we're going to go down and see a few more options, okay? You have the usual kind of browser command line, Next Basic, which is Spectrum Next, calculator, on-screen calculator, your guide, more. We'll go down to more. And this is where you can use your different setups on the machine. You can have CPM, which is useful if you want to have a look at kind of what CPM was all about. And CPM was something that predates MS-DOS in its popularity and its usefulness. But MS-DOS basically took it over after Gary Kildall kind of dropped the ball. He had everything sewn up, but then again, that's a video for another time. But then you've got 48k basic, 128k basic, ZX80, 81. You've also got 48 ROM carts and 128 ROM carts. Okay, so we'll go back to more, and it brings you back to the main menu. So we'll go back to more, and we'll kick it into ZX81 basic. And it gives you 1K, 4K, 16, 32. Okay, so if I go to 32k RAM, because I never had a ZX81 with 32k of memory, but you know, it doesn't look or feel any different. It's just a ZX81. There's a bit of a glitch because on a ZX81 you don't get that screen refresh, not in the way this is doing it. So if we run this, okay, it's kind of slowed it down to what a ZX81 would appear to be. So if we list it, okay, so if I do 30 rem refresh, okay, just to put something else, you can see that flicker there. That's not right, but I've no doubt that it will run most of the ZX81 software. So out of interest, we're going to try it on the standard 1K mode and see if it does exactly the same, because on the Harlequin it doesn't do that. It acts like a ZX81. So this is standard, going to be standard 1K RAM. Whoop. There we go. Oh, this keyboard. Okay, so that seems more like a classic ZX81. So we're not getting the blank. It's running really well. So let's go back to ZX81 mode, and we'll do a 16k, because that would seem to be the kind of standard set of a ZX81. Okay, so we'll go down to 16k, and we'll do roughly the same. It's doing that screen blank. On the 1K one it works fine. I've got original ZX81s and it doesn't do that. So I don't know whether it's a feature of it slowing it down probably too much on this machine, but you know, it's doing that. But at the end of the day, if it runs the software fine, then it's not going to be a big enough deal. You're probably going to say, well, this isn't what Next is all about, but it actually is, because this machine is kind of given as this kind of really usable be-all machine with different cores you can put in to change its kind of architecture, so to speak, to make it do different things or imitate different machines. So if we do 1K RAM, yeah, this is more like a standard ZX80. You can see the flicker. The flicker's a little quick though. Okay, so yeah, it's not doing that good a job of emulating the 1881, but at the end of the day, it gives you an idea of what those machines were like. I'm not going to be too hard on this machine because I actually quite like it in this format. I'm not, the keyboard is terrible. The keyboard is just the worst. It's worse than a standard Spectrum keyboard, rubber key keyboard, because I think the faceplate's been a fraction of a millimeter cut too small and it's catching every single key. and the membrane doesn't seem to be fantastic. But then again, it's the package which does look right. So if we go to Next Basic, and you've got the standard Next Basic with acts much the same as any other basic, really. There are sprites you can use. There you go, and there are a lot of enhancements over the original basic, which I have to get to grips with over the next couple of weeks. So there will be another video. This is just an overview of the system, and I can kind of see the appeal of having sprites on a Spectrum, because sprites were never there on a Spectrum. So having sprites makes it probably a better platform to do games, basic games, or even machine language games, just to, you know, make it a lot easier for collision detection and so on. So the other thing is usual things like calculator, and it's just the normal calculator you'd find on a Plus model. But what I'd like to try out is a 48K game, just to round it off, just to give it a quick overview of this, just to let you know, make your own mind up whether you want this machine or not, or you would rather go for a Harlequin or a Sisyph or one of the other many clones that are out there, or even just do it on a Raspberry Pi. So we'll try this one. We'll use 48K mode, and hopefully the sound will change. It'll come through the TV speaker and not the machine itself, because it doesn't have an onboard beeper. Okay, this is doing a bit of an attempt at left, right, up, down, fire. It's doing a little bit of an attempt at trying to emulate the sound. Well, it's doing okay with the graphics. It's got that kind of 48K look about it, which is nice. And now the sound, you can actually kind of get a good idea. Yeah, it's got a good idea of it. It does emulate it quite well. Yep, so it does a nice job of being a 48K ZX Spectrum, but nothing really spectacular if you think about it. Okay, so that's a quick overview of a Spectrum NGO, which is basically a clone of a ZX Spectrum Next in a rubber keyboard and case and so on. But you also saw my modified Spectrum Plus in the beginning of the video. So I'm just trying to get to grips as to why you would go for a Spectrum Next over a Harlequin or a Sisyph or one of the other Spectrum clones. Well, the jury's still out as far as I'm concerned on that. I do like the Next. I do like the NGO, because the NGO seems to make a lot of sense in pricing. It makes a lot of sense in what it can do, as in it can be a ZX Spectrum Plus, ZX Spectrum Standard, ZX Spectrum 128, Spectrum Next, CPM machine, and ZX 1881, although not the best at being a ZX 1881. But you know, it does a decent enough job. Now I can see the appeal of the Spectrum Next, as in not so much a nostalgia piece, but as a kind of evolution on the ZX Spectrum. But I can see more of an appeal with the NGO because it's cheaper. You can plug in a PS2 keyboard, so you don't really need to go all out on the Spectrum rubber key case, etc., or any case. You can put it in a project box. and use it as a mini desktop with a PS2 keyboard. You can either put it in a plus case, you can put it in a different case to make it whatever you want it to be, and it's also low cost-ish to be of kind of utility to people who want to play around with it and find out what all of this Next business is all about. Is it something over and above the Harlequin that I would use? Probably not, because 99.9% of the software is going to be based on 128 and 48K. If people start writing new software or newish software for the Spectrum, it's going to be based on 128 and 48K, because the market is much bigger. There's very few Spectrum Next titles out there, and what there is out there is fairly okay, as you saw by that little glimpse of that one there. I mean, it's much more colourful. You can tell the difference in the machines. You can tell how much of an evolution the Next is on the original Spectrum, which I completely agree with. It's nice, but I think for most, I think they'd rather have a really reliable ZX Spectrum in the form of a Harlequin or a Sisyph, and then you get the same or almost the same features, apart from the option to be a Spectrum Next. So you can click up the CPU performance to make your games a little bit more playable or a little smoother and faster. You can keep everything on board as far as the Sisyph is concerned on its onboard div MMC, very similar to what the Next has and the Engo has on board. There doesn't seem to be a lot of incentive to put the Raspberry Pi accelerator in this, because I don't think it's necessary. And this one, I didn't mention, has the Bluetooth option as well, so I can do exactly what I did on the modified Spectrum Plus as far as loading games from your mobile phone and software from that. So do I like the Engo? Yes. Would I purchase a ZX Spectrum Next? Still no. It's too expensive for what it is. It doesn't justify the cost. If they brought it down to the ZX Spectrum Engo kind of prices, including a fully built one like this for a few £100 rather than the price of your Spectrum Next, then yeah, then the Next would be more viable as a choice. But do I like the Engo, and would I like a Spectrum Next if I actually had one? Yeah, I'd like it. I wouldn't have any complaints about the Next, or I don't have any complaints really about the Engo. I just think that for most people, they're going to be running Spectrum based software. The Next, if I ever get hold of one, I would like to learn more about, you know, the Spectrum Next OS, the Spectrum Next Basic, the Spectrum Next programming it. Yeah, so I would actually like it. I'm not going to be down on it, because the only thing I'm actually down on is the cost. I think the cost of ownership is too high when you can go out for roughly the same sort of money as buy a reasonably good tablet, a very good laptop, or even a mid-range base unit for a PC, which are all eminently more powerful than what the Spectrum Next is. And you can download Next OS anyway and get the whole kind of feeling of it, the whole software, run everything that you would more than likely want to run on your Spectrum Next as a Next on a PC. So yeah, I like it. I like the Next, but I think it's just basically it's overpriced, and I think they're not producing enough of them to make a difference in the market for software producers to produce a lot of software for them. It's going to be hobbyist, really. I mean, more hobbyist than the ZX Spectrum is, if you get my drift. But yeah, so anyway, this is a brief overview of the Engo and also the modifications you can do to a standard Spectrum to make them more useful. I hope you enjoyed this. I hope I'm not going to get too battered by my comments on the Next. I hope you kind of see where I'm coming from, and I hope you'll join me again, because I'm going to do a lot more on the Next, the Sisyph, and some more of the clones in future episodes once I've got to grips with the Next itself. Okay, this is just out of the box. So thanks for watching, hope you enjoyed this, and I'll see you soon. Thank you, bye bye.